Welcome to Stardust Studio's 17 Business Series. In this video, we will be addressing a decision-making process called OODA Loop. You will that it is more of a cycle than a process, thus the name OODA Loop. The main idea is to make decisions in a relatively short period of time while continuing evaluating the decision. Please learn and enjoy.
Welcome to Stardust Studios. Today we are diving deep into a concept that, well, it might sound a little bit like it comes straight from a battlefield, but it's got some pretty powerful applications for anyone looking to make effective decisions.
Yeah, and we're talking like whether you're strategizing for a big project, navigating a career change, or even just trying to understand a really complex situation.
Absolutely.
It's the OODA Loop. Have you heard of this?
Oh, yeah, it's a classic.
Developed by U.S. Air Force Colonel John Boyd.
Yeah.
And our mission in this deep dive is to explore what it is, why it's so effective, and how understanding it can give you an edge in a variety of aspects of your life.
Absolutely. Our deep dive today is based on material that explains this model. Really drawing parallels between military strategy and the challenges that we face in our own environments.
We'll unpack the core ideas to give you a really clear understanding of this framework.
Gotcha. So I've always thought it's interesting how often business language borrows from the military, like fighting off threats in the market, talking about price war.
Right, exactly.
Or you need to gather intelligence on your competitors.
It's true, yeah.
Like we're in a battle all the time.
You know what I mean? It's like, those analogies pop up everywhere.
Yeah, and one of the most significant military strategies to actually make its way into the business world is this OODA Loop model, often referred to as like the decision cycle.
Yeah, the decision cycle, yes.
Yeah, and this framework was developed by this U.S. Air Force Colonel John Boyd, right? And he mainly wanted to understand how fighter pilots could make incredibly fast, effective decisions in the heat of combat.
Yeah, it's a high-pressure situation.
Yeah, high stakes.
Super high stakes, for sure.
So what's fascinating, I think, is when you actually look at the origins of this model, the specific scenario Boyd analyzed was the success of the American F-86 fighter jet against the Soviet MiG-15 during the Korean War. And on paper, the MiG had superior speed and turning capabilities, which you would think, just thinking about it,
you'd think that would give it a huge advantage, right?
Yeah, you would assume that would give it a distinct advantage in a dogfight.
Yeah, for sure.
But
the reality on the ground, in the air, I guess.
Yeah, in the air, right.
It was quite different.
Yeah, it was a different story.
So
Boyd's analysis, it revealed a critical, less obvious factor. The American F-86 pilot had a significantly superior field of vision from their cockpit compared to the Russian pilots flying the MiG.
Interesting.
Think about what that means for the pilot.
Yeah,
In the moment, that broader view allowed the American pilots to kind of take in more information more rapidly.
Exactly.
They could see what was going on, what their opponent was doing.
Yeah, the whole picture.
And the overall situation with greater clarity.
Totally.
And I think that...
And that's the key. This improved situational awareness, that gave the F-86 pilot a real crucial competitive advantage, right? They could assess what was happening around them faster and better than their opponent.
Yeah.
And as a result, they could often anticipate the enemy pilot's moves, surprise them, and force them into making mistakes.
Yeah.
You can see how being able to process information more effectively in a dynamic environment, that's powerful.
Oh, absolutely. Which is incredibly powerful. And it's not a huge leap to see how this translates to the business world, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Success in a competitive market often hinges on being one step ahead, anticipating your competitor's actions and reacting effectively.
Yeah.
And in today's rapidly evolving business landscape.
Staying informed and adapting your strategies quickly it's more critical than ever for success.
Yeah.
So how do we do that?
Well, that's where the OODA Loop comes in, right? It provides a structured way to achieve that very agility. Right? It's a 4-stage decision loop. Specifically designed to enable rapid, effective, and proactive decision-making in those kind of dynamic situations we were just talking about.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's break it down.
Yeah.
4 stages.
All right.
First is observe.
Observe, yeah.
What does that actually involve
Yeah.
in a business context?
Observe is fundamentally about gathering current information from as many relevant sources as possible. Right. So
think back to that pilot, right? With the wide field of vision, you want to capture as much data about your environment as you can.
Yeah.
And at this initial stage, it's useful to ask yourself a few key questions. Like, what's currently happening in your market? What's happening in your industry? Even within your own organization? Like, what directly affects you or your goals? What's happening? That might have, like, an indirect influence. And looking ahead, what potential shifts or developments might impact you in the future?
That's a good point.
Right. And it's also valuable to kind of periodically reflect, you know, on your past assumptions and predictions. Were they accurate? You know, where did reality diverge from what you expected?
Interesting.
And understanding those discrepancies can really sharpen your observational skills going forward.
Those are really insightful questions. Yeah, definitely.
To consider. So once you've gathered this initial information, what's the crucial next step in the loop?
So that leads us directly to the second stage, Orient.
Okay.
And this is where you actively analyze the information that you've collected during that observe phase, right?
Yeah.
And you use it to update your understanding of the situation, right? It's fundamentally about interpretation.
Gotcha.
And this is where it becomes particularly interesting because how you interpret the information isn't a purely objective process.
So true. What factors actually influence?
Okay, so according to Boyd's framework, a couple of key elements really shape your orientation. Things like your cultural background and traditions. Your genetic predispositions, your capacity for both like detailed analysis, but also broader synthesis of information. The sum of all your previous experiences.
And of course, any new information that continues to come in.
Right. Okay. So
it's vital to be aware of these filters. Because they inevitably influence how you perceive and make sense of the data you've observed.
Right.
And the faster and more effectively you can orient, the greater the advantage you'll likely have. So if you can grasp the nuances of your environment and the competitive landscape, you know, more quickly than others, you're in a much stronger position to act decisively.
Okay.
So consider your team's cultural background, for example.
Okay.
Are there ingrained ways of thinking that might lead to a specific interpretation of market data? You know, for instance, a culture that highly values consensus might be slower to recognize and react to disruptive trends.
So interesting. It's true.
Right.
Our past experiences and our inherent perspectives.
Definitely color how we interpret new information.
So after you've diligently observed and oriented yourself to the situation, what's the third step?
What is it?
In the OODA Loop,
third step.
The third stage is decide. Based on your observations, your updated orientation, you determine a specific course of action. It's important to approach these decisions as your best informed guesses at that moment.
So these decisions aren't meant to be rigid or inflexible.
Precisely. They should be viewed as adaptable and subject to revision as you continue to cycle through the loop, right? So as new observations come in and your understanding evolves, your decisions and your actions can and should be adjusted. You're essentially in a continuous learning process. Right. And the decisions you make
are a direct response to that ongoing refinement of your knowledge and awareness.
So that makes perfect sense. So we observe.
We orient.
We decide. And the final crucial step in this decision cycle is
act. That's correct. And the act stage is where you implement the decision you've made. But it's critical to remember. The loop doesn't end there. right?
Okay.
Once you've acted, you immediately cycle back to observe, to assess the results of your action.
Okay.
Did it produce the results you intended?
Yeah.
What new information has emerged
Right.
as a consequence of your action?
Right.
So your actions themselves become new data points that feed back into the next iteration of the loop.
Yeah.
And it's vital to learn from the outcomes of your actions as well as the reaction of your competitors to stay ahead.
So it's not a one-time event.
It's not, no.
It's an ongoing
iterative process.
A continuous
loop. Just as the name.
Exactly. The OODA loop isn't intended to be a linear step-by-step.
Right. Yeah.
It's about integrating decision-making into a more fluid and adaptive process.
Right.
Right. And the quicker and more efficiently you could move through each stage, the better
you'll be.
Positioned you are, right? Okay. The aim is to accelerate the speed at which you can orient yourself based on new information, and then translate that understanding into effective action.
Okay.
So you want to achieve a seamless transition between what you observe, how you interpret it, and what you ultimately do about it.
And the significant benefit of moving through these stages, the benefit
with speed and agility is that you can become far more...
You can be much more proactive
in your approach.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So when you can make these transitions rapidly, you put yourself in a position to anticipate and seize opportunities that your competition might not even be aware of yet.
Wow.
Boyd famously described this as operating within your opponent's OODA loop.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
When you can consistently cycle through the loop faster than your competitor, they're likely to find themselves constantly reacting to changes in the environment and to your moves while you're
dictating the pace.
Right. You're on the offensive.
Yeah.
And you're forcing them into a reactive posture.
Wow.
Which puts them at a disadvantage.
That concept of operating.
That's powerful, right?
Within the opponent's OODA loop is incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
But with this strong emphasis on speed and rapid iteration.
Right.
Are there any important considerations?
There are, yeah.
Or potential pitfalls?
Yeah, I mean, while speed is often a significant advantage, it's not always the singular priority.
Yeah.
Right. As our source material emphasizes, you need to strategically balance speed with a degree of caution.
Okay.
Right. In certain situations, making a rapid decision is absolutely necessary.
Right.
But in others, a more deliberate, thoughtful approach may be more appropriate to avoid costly mistakes.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So the optimal approach will depend on various factors, right?
Yeah.
The typical product cycle times in your industry.
Okay.
The rate of change in your market.
Yeah.
And critically, the potential magnitude of the consequences resulting from a poor decision.
Sometimes a decision made in haste can have more damaging effects in the long run.
Absolutely no.
So the material also briefly mentions a related concept that you might be familiar with.
You might be familiar with this one, Plan, Do, Check, Act.
Do you see any connections there?
I do, yeah.
I do too. It sounds like both frameworks emphasize.
Yeah, I mean, they both emphasize a cycle of action and learning.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So the OODA Loop model, it shares some fundamental similarities with Plan, Do, Check, Act.
Yeah.
Both frameworks underscore the importance of thoroughly analyzing the situation.
Right.
Checking whether your actions are producing the results you want.
Yeah.
Right. And making adjustments.
Yeah.
Based on that feedback, So
it's that iterative process.
It's that iterative process,
of continuous learning.
Yeah, continuous learning and adaptation.
Right.
Yeah, that's the key link between them.
Yeah, and the material makes brief reference to brain and the Kepner-Trago matrix.
Right.
Can you explain
a
little bit why those were mentioned?
Absolutely. So those are mentioned as alternative or complementary models.
Okay, right.
That you might find useful.
Yeah.
In certain decision-making scenarios.
Okay.
Brain is really helpful.
Right.
If you're looking to consciously balance logical analysis with your intuition.
Okay.
Or instincts, right?
Yeah.
When making choices.
Okay.
It encourages you to consider the benefits.
Okay.
The risks, alternatives, information needed.
Okay.
and the potential outcome of doing nothing.
So the Kepner-Trego matrix.
Right. The Kepner-Trego matrix, on the other hand, is a structured methodology designed to help you systematically weigh different options and thoroughly assess potential risks and consequences associated with each choice.
So while these are valuable tools, they're
distinct from the OODA Loop.
Distinct from the OODA Loop.
Which, focuses more on the speed and adaptability of the decision cycle.
So they could be.
Yeah, they could be.
Their own
deep dives
in the future.
At some point, absolutely.
Let's circle back.
Okay, let's circle back
to the core of our discussion today, the OODA Loop.
Right.
And summarize
the key takeaways.
Absolutely. The 4 fundamental stages are observe, orient, decide,
and act.
Yeah.
The most crucial aspect to remember is the continuous and iterative nature of this cycle.
Right.
So by incorporating new information as you observe, refining your understanding through orientation, making informed decisions, and then acting on them, you progressively move closer to achieving your desired outcomes in a dynamic environment.
Right.
And this model is particularly valuable when you need to make decisions quickly with speed and agility. By mastering this rapid and adaptive decision cycle, you can enhance your ability to stay ahead, respond effectively to challenges, and capitalize on emerging opportunities.
So this framework originally
it's pretty amazing.
Conceived in this intense environment of aerial combat offers a really valuable lens to understand and improve your decision-making processes across a wide spectrum of contexts.
Thinking now about the speed and accuracy of your own observe, orient, decide, act cycles. What area stands out to you as one where you might consciously apply this framework?
This deep dive into the OODA Loop really provides a compelling example of how analyzing those underlying dynamics can lead to
more effective strategies.
And a sharper understanding.
And a sharper understanding of the environment.
Of your surrounding environment. Thank you for listening to the Stardust Studios podcast.